The crowbar felt heavy in Sarah Chen's hands, heavier than it should have for a woman who'd spent the last 6 months hauling boxes at the warehouse. But tonight, weight didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the silver Honda Accord parked under the flickering streetlight, and what she'd found inside the glove compartment 20 minutes ago. She brought the crowbar down on the windshield again, glass spiderwebbed across the surface, and somewhere in the distance she could hear herself screaming. The sound felt disconnected from her body, like it was coming from someone else entirely. Emma's name tore from her throat, raw and desperate. Ham. Her daughter's face flashed before her eyes-gapped toothed smile, pigtails bouncing as she ran toward the school playground. 8 years old. 8 years, 3 months, and 12 days of life, cut short by the monster who owned this car. The passenger window exploded under her next swing. Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Sarah spun around, crowbar still raised. A police officer stood 10 feet away, hand hovering near his weapon, his face a mixture of concern and caution. Officer Martinez, according to his nameplate, young, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes that reminded her painfully of her late husband. "I can't," Sarah gasped, her chest heaving. "I can't step away. Do you understand what this is? Do you know whose car this is?" "Why don't you tell me?" Martinez said, taking a careful step forward. "Put the crowbar down, and we'll talk. This belongs to the man who killed my daughter." The words came out flat, matter-of-fact, as if she were commenting on the weather. Emma Chen, 3rd grade, Riverside Elementary. "Ring any bells, officer?" Martinez's expression shifted. Everyone in town knew about Emma Chen, the little girl who'd vanished from the school playground 3 weeks ago. The search that had consumed the entire community, the body they'd found in Miller's Creek. "Mrs. Chen," Martinez said softly, "I'm very sorry for your loss. But you need to Gregory Walsh," Sarah interrupted, gesturing toward the car with her crowbar. 43 years old, works at the water treatment plant, lives alone on Maple Street, volunteers at the community center. She laughed, a broken sound. "Everyone loves Gregory Walsh, salt of the earth," they said. "Such a nice man," they said. Martinez kept his hand near his weapon but didn't draw it. "Mrs. Chen, if you have information about Mr. Walsh, you need to let us handle this through proper channels." "Proper channels?" Sarah's voice rose to a shriek. "Proper channels? I've been calling you people for 3 weeks, I told you," Emma said. "A man at the community center made her uncomfortable. I told you she was scared of someone who knew her name, knew her schedule. But what did you do? You patted me on the head and told me to let you handle it." The officer's radio crackled to life. "Unit 12, what's your status?" Martinez keyed his radio without taking his eyes off Sarah. "I've got a situation at Riverside Elementary. Need backup, but keep it quiet. We've got the victim's mother here." "The victim's mother?" Sarah laughed again, high and hysterical. "Is that what I am? Just another grieving parent you need to manage?" She turned back to the car and swung the crowbar at the driver's side mirror. It snapped off cleanly, clattering across the asphalt. "Mrs. Chen, I understand you're in pain." "Pain?" Sarah whirled on him. "Pain is a scraped knee. Pain is a broken heart. She gestured wildly at herself, at the destroyed car, at the empty school playground beyond. "This is what happens when someone rips out your soul and feeds it to the dogs." Martinez took another step closer. "How did you know to come here? How did you know this was his car?" Sarah's grip tightened on the crowbar. For a moment, she looked like she might swing it at him instead of the Hondo. Then something crumpled in her expression, and the fight went out of her all at once. "Because I followed him," she whispered. "For 3 days, I followed Gregory Walsh. I watched him go to work, watched him eat lunch at the diner, watched him visit the community center where my baby girl spent her afternoons." Her voice broke. "And tonight, I watched him come here. Here, to the school. He parks here every Tuesday night." Sarah's words came faster now, tumbling over each other. 11 o'clock like clockwork. Sits in his car for exactly 30 minutes, then drives home. I thought maybe he was dealing drugs or meeting someone for an affair. Something normal. Something that didn't involve ... double quotes. She couldn't finish the sentence. "Mrs. Chen, what made you check inside the car?" Sarah reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small pink hair tie, the kind little girls wore in their ponytails. Martinez's blood ran cold as he recognized it from the missing person reports. Emma's, Sarah said simply. It was on the dashboard. Along with this, she reached into her other pocket and withdrew a child's bracelet. Plastic beads spelling out Emma in bright purple letters. And these, a handful of photographs scattered across the asphalt school photos, playground shots, images of Emma Chen that no stranger should have possessed. Martinez's radio crackled again. Unit 12, backup is 2 minutes out. Tell them to hurry, Sarah said, her voice suddenly calm. To calm, because Gregory Walsh just pulled into the parking lot. Martinez spun around. Sure enough, a man was walking across the darkened lot toward them, moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. Mid-40s, average height, wearing a community center volunteer t-shirt. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a pillar of the community, a man parents trusted with their children. Sarah, Gregory Walsh called out, his voice filled with what sounded like genuine concern. Sarah Chen. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? The performance was flawless. If Martinez hadn't seen the evidence scattered around the destroyed Honda, he might have believed Walsh was exactly what he appeared to be. Sarah raised the crowbar again, and this time her voice carried the cold fury of a woman with nothing left to lose. Tell him, Officer Martinez. Tell Gregory Walsh why I'm here. Walsh stopped walking, his eyes taking in the destroyed car. The evidence on the ground, the police officer with his hand on his weapon. For just a moment, his mask slipped. The concerned community volunteer disappeared, replaced by something reptilian and calculating. I don't know what she's talking about, Walsh said, but his voice had changed. Harder now, defensive. That's my car. She's destroyed my property. I want her arrested. Your property, Sarah repeated. Your property that contains my daughter's hair tie, her bracelet, photographs of her that you had no right to take. She took a step toward him, crowbar raised. Tell us about Tuesday nights, Gregory. Tell us what you do here, in this parking lot, looking at pictures of the children you've stolen from. Walsh's eyes darted toward the street, measuring distances, calculating escape routes. I want a lawyer. Funny thing about lawyers, Sarah said, taking another step forward. They can't bring back dead little girls. Martinez finally drew his weapon, though he kept it pointed at the ground. Everyone stay calm. Mr. Walsh, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them. This is harassment, Walsh protested, but sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. I haven't done anything wrong. That woman is clearly having some kind of breakdown. Sarah's laugh was sharp as broken glass. You think this is a breakdown? This is clarity, Gregory. For the first time in 3 weeks, I can see everything clearly. She reached into her jacket one more time and pulled out a small digital camera. Tell Officer Martinez about the other photos. Gregory, the ones you keep at home, the ones I found. When I broke into your house this afternoon, Walsh went completely still. You broke into my house. Same way you broke into my daughter's life, Sarah replied, except I didn't kill anyone while I was there. Martinez felt the situation spinning out of control. His backup couldn't arrive fast enough. Mrs. Chen, I need you to give me the camera. And Mr. Walsh, you're going to come with me to the station so we can sort this out. Sort this out. Walsh's facade finally cracked completely. You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Emma was just she was going to tell someone. I couldn't let her tell. The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. Martinez felt his training kick in, the careful protocols for handling confessions, but Sarah Chen moved faster than thought. The crowbar caught Gregory Walsh across the temple before anyone could react. He went down hard, blood spattering across the asphalt, his body twitching once before going still. Sarah stood over him, breathing hard, the crowbar still clutched. In her white-knuckled grip, when she looked up at Martinez, her eyes were completely empty. Now you know why I'm here, she said. In the distance, sirens wailed through the night, but they were already too late. Justice had arrived first, wearing the face of a mother with nothing left to lose, and a crowbar heavy enough to balance the scales. The blood looked black under the parking lot lights. Officer Martinez stared down at Gregory Walsh's motionless form, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. 3 weeks of careful police work, of following leads and building a case, and it had all ended in 30 seconds of raw vengeance. Sarah Chen stood frozen, the crowbar still in her hands, her face blank as if she'd just awakened from a dream. The weight of what she'd done hadn't hit her, yet Martinez had seen it before. The strange calm that followed acts of violence. The shock would come later. Mrs. Chen, Martinez said carefully, his weapon now drawn and pointed at her. "I need you to drop the crowbar now." She looked down at the tool in her hands, as if surprised to find it there. "He confessed," she said. Quietly, "You heard him confess. I heard him, but you need to drop the weapon." The crowbar clattered to the asphalt just as 3 patrol cars screamed into the parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the scene in garish colors. Martinez's backup had arrived, along with what looked like half the night shift. "We need an ambulance?" Martinez shouted as officers poured out of their vehicles. "And call Detective Rever. Tell her we've got a development in the Chen case." Sergeant Thompson, a 20-year veteran with gray hair and tired eyes, took charge of the scene. He surveyed the destroyed Honda, the scattered evidence, Gregory, Walsh's bleeding form, and Sarah Chen standing like a statue in the middle of it all. "Jesus Christ, Martinez. What happened here?" "Suspect confessed to the murder of Emma Chen," Martinez said, not lowering his weapon. "Then the victim's mother administered justice." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Is he dead?" Martinez knelt beside Walsh, checking for a pulse. The man's breathing was shallow but steady, blood trickling from a gash above his left ear. "Alive. Unconscious, but alive." "Get the paramedics over here when they arrive," Thompson ordered. He turned to Sarah, his voice gentler. "Mrs. Chen, I'm going to need you to put your hands behind your back." Sarah didn't resist as Thompson cuffed her. She seemed to be looking through him, through all of them, at something only she could see. "My daughter liked purple," she said conversationally. "Purple and pink. She had this stuffed elephant Mr. Peanuts that she carried everywhere. When we found her body, Mr. Peanuts wasn't there. I kept thinking maybe she'd dropped him somewhere, and he was waiting for her to come back." Thompson exchanged a glance with Martinez. Shock was definitely setting in. The ambulance arrived just as Detective Carmen Rivera pulled up in her unmarked sedan. Rivera was Martinez's age but had twice his experience, having worked homicide in Chicago before transferring to this sleepy college town. She'd been the lead investigator on Emma Chen's case from day one. "Talk to me," Rivera said, approaching the scene with the careful steps of someone who'd worked 1,000 crime scenes. Martinez filled her in quickly Walsh's confession, the evidence in his car, Sarah Chen's vigilante justice. Rivera listened without interruption, her dark eyes taking in every detail. "Where's the camera Mrs. Chen mentioned?" Rivera asked. Martinez pointed to where it had fallen when Sarah dropped the crowbar. Rivera pulled on latex gloves and carefully picked it up, scrolling through the images on the small screen. Her expression grew progressively darker. "Madre de Dios," she whispered, then louder. "Thompson, I need a warrant for Walsh's residence. Now, and get the tech team out there, this is going to be a long night." The paramedics loaded Gregory Walsh onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask over his face and a cervical collar. Around his neck, he was conscious now, his eyes darting frantically between the police officers surrounding him. "I want to press charges," Walsh mumbled through the mask. "That woman assaulted me. I want her arrested." Rivera leaned over the stretcher, her voice ice. "Mr. Walsh, you're under arrest for the murder of Emma Chen. You have the right to remain silent, which I strongly suggest you exercise because anything you say is going to be used to put you away for the rest of your life." Walsh's eyes widened. Above the oxygen mask, I never said I killed her. I said she was going to tell someone. That's not the same thing." "Tell someone what, exactly?" Rivera asked. Walsh's lawyer training kicked in. He'd worked as a paralegal before taking the job at the water treatment plant. "I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything else without a lawyer present." "Smart man," Rivera said. "Too bad you weren't smart enough to leave little girls alone." As the ambulance pulled away, Rivera turned her attention to Sarah Chen. The woman was sitting in the back of a patrol car now, still cuffed, staring out at the playground where her daughter used to play. "Mrs. Chen," Rivera said, sliding into the passenger seat. "I need to ask you some questions." Sarah finally looked at her, and Rivera was struck by how young she seemed despite everything she'd been through. 32 years old, recently widowed, working 2 jobs to support herself and Emma. Life had dealt her enough blows before this final, devastating one. "Is he going to live?" Sarah asked. Probably. You gave him a concussion, but nothing like. Sarah nodded, as if this was merely interesting information. I meant to kill him, Rivera sighed. She'd been a cop long enough to know that honesty wasn't always the best policy during interrogations, but she also understood the need some people had to unburden themselves. Sarah, I have to advise you of your rights before we continue this conversation. I know my rights, Sarah said. My husband was a lawyer before he died. David Chen, maybe you knew him. He did a lot of pro bono work in the community. Rivera remembered David Chuna, quiet man who died in a car accident 8 months ago, leaving behind a young wife and daughter. She'd attended his funeral, along with half the town. I'm sorry for your loss, Rivera said. Both of your losses. David always said that justice and law aren't the same thing, Sarah continued. He said sometimes the law fails, and when it does, people have to find their own way to make things right. The law didn't fail here, Sarah. We were building a case for 3 weeks. Sarah's composure finally cracked. For 3 weeks, I told you people that Emma was scared of someone. I gave you descriptions. I told you about the community center. I begged you to look into the volunteers there. And what did you do? You told me children have active imaginations. You told me to be patient while you followed your leads. Rivera felt the familiar weight of guilt that came with cases like this. Sarah Chen wasn't wrong. They had been following leads, but slowly, carefully, building an airtight case. In the meantime, a killer had been walking free. You're right, Rivera said quietly. We should have moved faster. We should have listened to you. Sarah stared at her in surprise. She'd clearly been expecting defensiveness, excuses, the usual bureaucratic response. But that doesn't change what you did tonight, Rivera continued. You destroyed evidence. You committed assault with a deadly weapon. And you potentially compromised the entire case against Walsh. Did I? Sarah asked. Or did I get you a confession? Rivera had to admit the woman had a point. Walsh's admission that Emma was going to tell someone was damning, especially combined with the evidence in his car and whatever they'd find at his house. Tell me about the break-in, Rivera said. How did you get into his house? Sarah almost smiled. David taught me to pick locks, said it was a useful skill for a lawyer's wife. You never know when you might need to get into your own house after locking yourself out. And what did you find there? Everything, Sarah said simply. Photos of Emma, photos of other children, a diary where he wrote about following them, learning their routines. There's a box in his bedroom closet labeled souvenirs. I didn't look inside, I couldn't, but I took pictures of everything with his camera. Rivera made a mental note to prioritize the search of Walsh's house. If Sarah was telling the truth, they had enough evidence to put him away for multiple lifetimes. Why didn't you bring this information to us immediately? Sarah's eyes hardened. Because I knew you'd tell me to wait while you got warrants and followed procedures. Meanwhile, he was still out there, still free, still breathing the same air as other people's children. So you decided to take justice into your own hands. I decided to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. Rivera's radio crackled to life. Detective Rivera, we've got the warrant for Walsh's residence. Team is en route. Copy that, Rivera responded. She looked back at Sarah. Mrs. Chen, I have to take you in for processing. You're going to be charged with assault with a deadly weapon, at minimum, I understand. You might want to call a lawyer. Sarah laughed bitterly. My husband was my lawyer, and he's dead, just like my daughter. Rivera felt a stab of sympathy for the woman, but she had a job to do. There are public defenders. Detective Rivera, Officer Martinez appeared at the car window. We've got a problem. Rivera stepped out of the patrol car. What kind of problem? Martinez glanced around nervously, then lowered his voice. Thompson just got a call from the hospital. Gregory Walsh isn't who he says he is. What do you mean? They ran his fingerprints through the system when he was admitted. Real Gregory Walsh died in a car accident in Ohio 6 years ago. Our guy's been using his identity. Rivera felt her blood run cold. If Walsh was living under an assumed identity, it meant this wasn't his first rodeo. There could be other victims, other children, other grieving people. The booking process at the county jail felt surreal to Sarah Chen. Fingerprints, mugshots, the surrender of her wedding ring, and the small locket containing Emma's photo each step, stripped away another piece of her former life. The woman who'd dropped her daughter off at school that morning 3 weeks ago was gone. In her place sat someone Sarah barely recognized. "One phone call," the desk sergeant said, sliding a cordless phone across the metal table. Sarah stared at it. David would have known what to do, who to call, how to navigate the system, but David was gone. Her parents lived across the country and were too old to help. Emma's friends' parents would probably cross the street to avoid her now. "I don't need to call anyone," she said quietly. "Everyone needs to call someone, honey," the sergeant said, not unkindly. "Public defender's office is closed till morning." "But there's a bondsman down the street who I killed a child murderer," Sarah interrupted. "I'm not going anywhere." The sergeant studied her for a moment, then shrugged and processed the paperwork. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in a holding cell with 2 other women, a prostitute sleeping off a drunk and disorderly charge, and a college student who'd been arrested for possession. "What are you in for?" the college student asked. "Justice," Sarah replied. Meanwhile, Detective Rivera stood in Gregory Walsh's living room, or rather, the living room of the man who'd been calling himself Gregory Walsh. The search warrant had yielded a treasure trove of evidence, but also raised more questions than it answered. "Detective, you need to see this," Officer Martinez called from the bedroom. Rivera found him standing in front of an open closet, staring at a collection that made her stomach turn. Boxers labeled with dates and locations, each containing items that clearly belonged to children: hair ribbons, small toys, articles of clothing. Emma's stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, sat on a shelf like a trophy. "How many boxers?" Rivera asked. 12, Martinez said. "Going back 7 years. 12. Children at least, maybe more." Rivera pulled on fresh gloves and carefully lifted the lid of the box labeled Emma C., October 2024. Inside were photographs, school records somehow obtained illegally, and a detailed journal chronicling Emma's daily routines. The level of planning was meticulous, obsessive. "This wasn't random," Rivera said. "He studied her for months." Detective Crime Scene Technician Amy Chen, no relation to Sarah, appeared in the doorway. "We found something in the basement you need to see." The basement had been converted into a workshop, complete with soundproofing and a drainage system that made Rivera's blood run cold. But what drew her attention was a computer set up in the corner, multiple monitors displaying what appeared to be a sophisticated database. "He was cataloging them," Amy explained, pointing to the screens. "Names, ages, locations, photographs. There are over 200 entries here." Rivera scrolled through the database, her heart sinking with each entry. Some were marked as completed, others as in progress, and still others as future targets. Emma Chen's entry was marked as completed. "Get this to the FBI," Rivera ordered. "This is way bigger than one small-town case." Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. "Walsh conscious and talking. Demanding to see you." 30 minutes later, Rivera sat across from the man who'd been living as Gregory Walsh. His head was bandaged, but his eyes were alert and calculating. A court-appointed attorney sat beside him, looking uncomfortable. "I understand you want to make a statement," Rivera said. "I want to make a deal," Walsh replied. "I have information about cases you'll never solve without my help." "What kind of information?" "Locations, bodies, names of other people involved." Walsh leaned forward, as much as his restraints would allow. "But I want something in return." Rivera's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I want charges dropped against Sarah Chen." The request caught Rivera completely off guard. "Why would you care about Mrs. Chen?" "Because she did what needed to be done," Walsh said simply. "She found me when your investigation was going nowhere. She got me to confess when your interrogation techniques failed. She deserves a medal, not a prison sentence." The attorney shifted uncomfortably. "My client is prepared to provide information about 12 other homicides in exchange for—" "12?" Rivera interrupted. Walsh smiled, and it was the most chilling expression Rivera had ever seen. "The boxers in my closet are just the local ones. I've been traveling for work for 15 years. Detective, the water treatment industry takes you to a lot of small towns with a lot of trusting people." Rivera felt sick. "You're talking about a dozen more dead children." "I'm talking about a dozen more families who deserve closure," Walsh corrected. "Parents who are still wondering what happened to their babies. police departments with cold cases that will never be solved without my help, and you'll give us this information in exchange for dropping charges against Mrs. Chen. That's the deal." Rivera stood up abruptly. "I need to make some calls." Outside the hospital room, she immediately contacted FBI agent Patricia Morse, who'd been tracking a series of child murders across the Midwest for the past 5 years. "Rivera, please tell me you're calling with good news," Morse said. "I've got your killer," Rivera said, "but it's complicated." After explaining the situation, Morse was quiet for a long moment. 12 victims, you said. That's what he's claiming, and he's got evidence to back it up. What's he want in return?" "Charges dropped against the mother who nearly killed him. The mother who's sitting in jail right now, Sarah Chen. She lost her 8-year-old daughter to this monster." Another pause. "Carmen, I've been chasing this bastard for 5 years. 5 years of dead children and grieving parents. If he can give us closure on even half of those cases, you're saying we should make the deal? I'm saying we need to. Consider it. But the decision isn't mine to make." Rivera hung up and immediately called District Attorney Michael Harrison. The conversation that followed was heated and complex, involving legal precedents, public safety concerns, and the delicate balance between justice and vengeance. "The woman assaulted a suspect with a deadly weapon," Harrison argued. "We can't just ignore that because she had a good reason." "The suspect has confessed to multiple child murders," Rivera countered, "and he's offering information that could solve cold cases across 6 states. That doesn't change the law, Detective. Sometimes the law needs to be flexible." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "You're asking me to make a deal with the devil? I'm asking you to think about 12 other families who might finally get answers. And what about the message it sends? That vigilante justice is acceptable?" Rivera thought about Sarah Chen, sitting in a jail cell, about Emma's stuffed elephant gathering dust in an evidence locker, about the dozens of other children whose photos filled Walsh's database. "Maybe sometimes it is," she said. 3 hours later, Rivera found herself back at the county jail, standing outside Sarah Chen's holding cell. Sarah sat on the narrow bench, staring at the wall, looking like she'd aged 10 years in a single night. "Mrs. Chen," Rivera said, "I need to talk to you." Sarah looked up, her eyes hollow. "Is he dead?" "No, but he's talking." "Good. I hope he tells you about all the others." Rivera felt a chill. The children in the photographs, the ones who weren't Emma. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. "There were dozens of them. Some I recognized from missing persons reports over the years, some I didn't." "How many did you see?" "Too many." Sarah stood up slowly. "Detective, I need you to understand something. I'm not sorry for what I did. I'm only sorry I didn't do it sooner." Rivera unlocked the cell door. "Mrs. Chen, you're being released." Sarah stared at her in shock. "What?" "The charges against you are being dropped. The DA's office has decided that your actions, while illegal, were justified under the circumstances." "I don't understand." Rivera stepped into the cell and sat beside Sarah on the bench. "The man who killed Emma has information about other cases. He's willing to provide that information, but only if charges against you are dropped." Sarah's eyes widened. "He's protecting me, apparently. Why would he do that?" Rivera shook her head. "I don't pretend to understand how his mind works, but Mrs. Chen, there's something else you need to know. The man who killed Emma isn't Gregory Walsh. Gregory Walsh died 6 years ago in Ohio. We don't know who this person really is yet." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You mean he's done this before?" "We think so, multiple times, in multiple states." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "How many children? We don't know yet, but we're going to find out." Sarah stood up, her legs unsteady. "I want to see him, Mrs. Chen. I don't think that's a good idea. I want to look him in the eye and ask him why. Why Emma? Why any of them?" Rivera studied the woman's face, seeing something there that made her deeply uncomfortable. Sarah Chen wasn't finished with her quest for justice. This was just the beginning. "Mrs. Chen, you need to let us handle this from here. Go home, grieve for your daughter, try to rebuild your life." Sarah looked at her with eyes that held no warmth, no hope, no trace of the woman she'd been before Emma's death. "My life ended 3 weeks ago," she said. "Everything since then has just been sea."